Maui in the Hawaiian Islands. Tropical vacation paradise or the world's biggest open-air birdcage? Find out next on Twits and Pishers. Before the arrival of people, Hawaii was much like the Galapagos. On each island, remarkable species of plants, birds, and other animals evolved. Today, however, we find little sign of what was once one of nature's finest showcases of avian life. The first thing you notice about birds in Hawaii is that there are plenty of them. They're generally very good-looking birds. They're easy to identify, and many of them have exotic tropical-sounding songs and calls, so it's quite enjoyable. The second thing you notice, if you look into it a bit further, is that just about none of the birds you see around you are native. They're all introduced. They're all exotic invaders from someplace else. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not interesting. I mean, it's quite a different situation from what you have back on the mainland, isn't it? Most of the species are native, and then you have a few introduced house sparrows, European starlings, rock doves, things like that. You really can't watch birds in Hawaii without coming face to face with issues of bird conservation, bird evolution, and the role of introduced species in bird communities. The Hawaiian Islands form a long volcanic chain, more than 3,000 kilometers long. But I chose the island of Maui for this expedition since it is easy to get to and is more or less representative of the larger Hawaiian Islands, at least as far as bird life goes. This is Kilauea Bay on the south shore of Maui, and at this time of year, it's Thanksgiving, by the way, American Thanksgiving. At this time of year, the humpback whales are in close to shore, so we might just see some whales out here. But whale watching is always a bit hit or miss, so why not go with the sure thing and spend a few minutes admiring these myna birds on the lawn. Now, this species of myna, it's called the common myna. It used to be called the Indian myna, which was actually a better name in my opinion because it told you right off the bat that this was not a native Hawaiian bird. It's another introduced bird. You can recognize them quite easily. They're, a little bit bigger than a starling. They're part of the starling family, maybe about robin-sized, with a yellow bill and a yellow patch behind the eye and a big white flare in the wing when they fly. They're handsome birds, aren't they? And they're kind of boisterous. They make squawky noises. They're quite an interesting bird to watch because they're always doing something neat. But, let's think about the starling family for a minute here because I get a kick out of that whole family. In North America, the European starling is a tremendous pest, an introduced bird that competes with native birds and poops on buildings, and everyone hates the European starling. But here, people don't seem to be quite so upset about the myna, even though it's just basically a fancy starling. The European starling has been seen only twice in Hawaii, according to the field guide, and so it hasn't managed to introduce itself, or establish itself, I should say, here at all. But the myna is doing very well. It's kind of an interesting contrast to the situation in North America, where the crested myna, a different species of myna, is almost extinct now in Vancouver since its introduction, and the European starling is doing fine. But, there's some over in the trees there too. They're everywhere. They're quite wonderful. At night they gather together in huge roosts, and man, can they make a lot of noise. Nifty birds. But, you can't spend too much time looking at mynas. They really should be a myna part of your trip. This row of trees is not bad for birds. Quite a few things in here. It's amazing how dry it gets when you get out of the range of the lawn sprinklers, isn't it? What do we got here? There's a northern cardinal. That's a familiar North American bird, which has, of course, been introduced as well. There are actually 2 species of cardinals on Maui, both introduced. The other one's quite nifty, the red-crested cardinal, quite a beautiful bird, but it came from South America. Much of the time, birding around the resorts in Hawaii is like birding in a pet store, because that's where the birds originally came from. And people just let them go, feeling sorry for them, and not apparently feeling sorry for the native birds of Hawaii and the bird watchers. So what else have we? I saw some nutmeg mannikins, a little sort of finch. Just a minute, I'll show you the, no, that's not it. There we are, nutmeg mannikin, a little brownish kind of finch. Small things and almost impossible to get videotape of. But what else? Oh, there's some. Hey, those are Java sparrows. Java sparrows. Java sparrows. Java sparrows are, I don't remember that one on the list here. Java sparrow. Whew, how about that? This is the problem and the excitement, the challenge, the whatever of bird watching in Hawaii. According to this book, which is a very good book, the Java sparrow doesn't occur on Maui, but there they are, 5 or 6 of them, so they do occur on Maui. The bird distributions are changing so rapidly that the field guides can't keep up. And are they? Oh, they're gone now. Anyway, yeah, this happens all the time. The first time I came to Hawaii, I saw a bird called a saffron finch before it was in the field guides. Sometimes it's a matter of these new introductions that happen so fast that you can't get them into the books. And sometimes it's a matter of birds that were already established going extinct or becoming extirpated locally. Like the pale-headed rosella. There used to be this Australian parrot called a pale-headed rosella here on Maui, and it was common for about 50 years. Then it just disappeared, and it's no longer in the field guides, although there are plenty of them still in Australia. Wild thing. Oh, it's nice here, you know, it really is. I'll bet you're wondering what sort of field guide to bring with you to Hawaii if you want to watch birds. It used to be that the Peterson Field Guide to Western Birds contained a short segment on the Hawaiian species, but then this book came out, A Field Guide to the Birds of Hawaii and the Tropical Pacific by Pratt, Bruner, and Barrett. It's a Princeton University book, and it's excellent, covers all the species that you might see. I can highly recommend it. Another book that you might want to have a look at is the Audubon Society's Guide to Hawaiian Birds. This one includes only the Hawaiian birds, and you can get it at most book and gift stores, at least the ones that I've been to, so it's a handy one to pick up once you get here. You know, if you're interested in birds, you can enjoy yourself just about anywhere in Hawaii. I've been hanging around this parking lot for the last half hour or so, getting lots of weird looks. Hey, but what do I care? I'm never going to see these people again. And, ooh, you know, the thing is, there's more of these little green birds here than I've ever seen before. They're Japanese white eyes, and that's another introduced bird. It's a very common bird in Hawaii. In fact, it's just about the most common bird in Hawaii. They're little guys. They remind you of kinglets or vireos if you're used to North American birds, but they're actually part of a weird little family that we don't get in North America at all, the white eyes, the Zosteropidae. And if you look at them closely, you'll notice that they don't even have white eyes. They just have a little ring of white feathers around the eye. These things right here, they feed on flower nectar, on insects, and on fruit, and they seem to be really enjoying feeding on these weird fruit on this tree here. Now, I asked at the front desk what kind of tree it is, and they told me it was called an autograph, and I realized that just knowing the name of the tree didn't help me at all, but it is a neat looking tree. And as you can see, these white eyes are really enjoying poking into the fruit and having a little bit of a meal from that. Once the fruit falls on the ground, they don't touch it. Very interesting bird, and a bird that's extremely easy
to confuse with some of the native honey creepers like the amakihi and the other little green birds that generally won't be found down this low in elevation. In the parking lot, it's almost all Japanese white-eye. Or Majiro, I think is the Japanese name. Nice name. Notice the bright green back, the yellow throat, and the very bold eye ring. That tells you for sure that you're looking at a Japanese white-eye. And apparently, these birds are much more squeakable than the native honey creepers as well. So let's give that a try and see if it's true. Brings people out on their balconies. Yep, it works. Dandy. Little green birds in the greenery, cardinals on the cars, and we'll be right back with silverbills among the silverware right after these messages.
Seems like most people visiting Hawaii spend most of their time on the beach. But the beach is not a good place for birds. It's too hot here and there's nothing for them to eat. If you want to see birds, the best place to start is an open-air restaurant. A local birder friend recommended one particular restaurant as a great place to see mooching birds. Quite a fancy restaurant too, I might add. I asked the waitress which item on the menu the birds like best, and she suggested the Maui onion rings or the toast. I chose the onion rings. The mynas were the first to show interest, completely ignoring the plastic owl that had been placed there to discourage them. The facts are that the only owl in Hawaii, the short-eared owl, doesn't look anything like the plastic one, and when songbirds pay any attention to owls, they mob them rather than avoid them. Those onion rings were great, by the way, big and juicy with crunchy stuff all over the outside. Delicious, but they couldn't have been good for either me or the birds. Speaking of which, as if drawn by the sound of my smacking lips, a gray francolin emerged from the surrounding gardens. I had been hearing these birds early each morning when they let loose with extremely loud calls before becoming bashful for the rest of the day. They were originally introduced to Hawaii from India as upland game birds in 1958, the year that I was born. There are no native chicken-like or gallinaceous birds in Hawaii, so the hunters had to bring some in. There hasn't been an open season for francolins for a couple of years now, however, since the birds do best where there are lawn sprinklers in places where shotguns and bird dogs are generally frowned upon. It's typically ironic then that this particular bird lives in a resort eating expensive food and reclining in professionally landscaped grounds. I might add that they aren't particularly adept at eating large chunks of onion ring batter. Francolins are part of the same family of birds that includes pheasants and partridges, although the name francolin signifies only that they belong to the genus Francolinus. Another regular customer at almost any open-air restaurant in Hawaii is the zebra dove, formerly called the barred dove or the peaceful dove. These birds are native to Southeast Asia and Australia, and they are small, about the size of the Inca doves we saw in Arizona. To me, they always look a bit unkempt and dirty, but I guess that's how I'd look if I lived on the floor of a restaurant myself. They breed here year-round, and as a result, there are plenty of them. Zebra doves make a pleasant cooing sound, and their powder blue faces and dainty table manners give them an innocent, quite likable personality. A warbling silverbill was preening itself on a nearby fern after bathing in the lovely artificial stream that runs through the garden. This species is a popular cage bird originally from Africa, and although it has a long history of association with people, it still doesn't trust us, and I never did see a silverbill stealing restaurant scraps.
Northern cardinals are another bird that never gets too terribly close to people. This one seemed a bit itchy, and the fact is that most birds, especially in tropical places, are host to various parasitic irritations. You can hide all sorts of unpleasantness under feathers as beautiful as those. A couple of nutmeg mannikins appeared to one side, and this one looked itchy too. Speaking of bird parasites, introduced birds brought avian malaria to Hawaii, a disease which, like its human counterpart, is transmitted by mosquitoes. Not surprisingly, someone managed to introduce them to Hawaii as well. There's another itchy bird, a house finch, a species introduced from North America, again as a cage bird. Birds in the restaurant aren't so much a health hazard to people, they are a health hazard to other birds, which is why none of the native land birds of Hawaii are to be found in the resort areas today. Many are now extinct thanks to introduced species, habitat destruction, and avian malaria. I'm not sure if the monarch butterflies of Hawaii made it here on their own, but I doubt it. The Hawaiian population is interesting because it doesn't migrate the way North American monarchs do. If they did, most would drown at sea. This green anole lizard was also introduced from North America, yet another escaped pet. They eat bugs, and if you think the introduced birds have done damage, imagine how much worse the situation is for native insects and other unglamorous creatures. Of course, no discussion of introduced birds would be complete without house sparrows, and there were plenty of them at the restaurant too, looking an awful lot like the ones back home. After my onion ring lunch, I was cheered by the sight of a Pacific golden plover on a lawn beside the road. These shorebirds migrate naturally from Siberia and western Alaska and set up winter feeding territories which they defend against other birds in just about any open area. The existence of these migrants inspired me to visit what I consider Maui's pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, Kilauea Pond National Wildlife Refuge. There I joined Refuge manager Katherine Smith for a bit of water birding.
What's that, female?
Pintail.
What? Oh, pintail, yes.
And there's some shovelers in there too.
Right, okay.
There are more common migrants, the pintails and the shovelers.
Where are these birds coming from?
They're coming from Alberta and Saskatchewan, and then they're proceeding westward to the California Delta, the coast.
Mm-hmm.
And then they catch the westerly trades over here to Hawaii. And it's kind of sad because we're actually losing that traditional flyway.
Oh, is that right?
And from the pre-1940s, they estimated the numbers at maybe 40,000 ducks. And they had very liberal bag limits. And then by the 1950s, the numbers were down from 40,000 to 10,000. And then the 1990 figures are down to 1,000. So 1,000 ducks total number making the migration to Hawaii now. And so we're a little concerned about losing that flyway entirely because that means we're not getting that many of any given species, and some of the rarer species we may be down to just a handful of individuals. And where do the birds learn to fly away? From the other ducks, from the older animals?
Right, yeah, so once you lose the
traditional
birds,
knowledge, if you will.
It took, 5 hours to fly here from Los Angeles in a jet, and these birds do it on their own?
Right.
And then they
Pretty
used to get
amazing.
shot?
Right.
What
Rude.
a tragic life!
Yeah, pretty rude.
Terrible!
Yeah, and I get tired flying in a jet for 5 or 6 hours. I can't imagine what it's like under your own power and a bird this size. That's kind of the wonder of it all, is that they arrive and that they do it again the next year.
And that they can find it. I mean, you look at a map and it's just a little tiny place in the
Not a
middle
lot
of the
land
Pacific.
area. And there's not a lot of wetlands here either, so it must be something pretty special for them
Another
to
show?
make the trip. Yeah, flying in low.
Yeah, it just amazes me that these birds are doing that kind of, that's a couple of thousand kilometers no matter where you come from, isn't it?
That's right. That's right. We get migratory waterfowl from Siberia. We get Eurasian widgeons occasionally coming in,
right?
and some otter sightings too. And then we also get teal from North America and cinnamon.
Well, I was
and
amazed at your list of
green wing.
vagrants, shorebirds, and waterfowl and all those sorts of things. Unbelievable.
It's an interesting place for birders because you never know what you're going to see.
Yeah, yeah.
And we're just beginning to get a good handle on the flyways as we're losing them.
So
Maybe
they're not,
we'll learn
they're not
more.
really native birds, but they're birds that have been coming here for the winter for generations and generations
Right.
and on
Right.
back.
In Hawaii, we'd say they're kamainas. They're longtime residents or good,
Oh, yeah,
good
that's
as
all
good
right.
as
Yeah.
locals. Yeah.
Yeah. I get a kick out of all those egrets up there too, but you're saying that's an introduced bird too. Why would you introduce the cattle egret?
Well, it's a good question.
Well,
why.
not you, but why would someone? Yeah.
Right. I wonder that too. But people do introduce species, and they were introduced back in the days when ranching was king, and when beef were being raised on the grasslands, and the insect pests were a problem, the flies, and so the cattle egrets were brought in to help control the fly problem, not realizing that they may have other repercussions and impacts on the native biota.
They
And
must not have.
They have.
They must not have known that old saying.
And what's that?
Life is too short for egrets.
They must not have.
In total, I saw 25 species of birds while making this episode, with less than 25 to go before we reach 200. Although I missed number 26, an osprey that our crew, Dwayne and Larry, captured on tape just to make me jealous of their sighting. Still, I'm pleased with the number of birds we saw, especially considering that we were on a remote oceanic island, a situation in which bird species numbers are always going to be relatively low. From a naturalist's perspective, the land habitats in Hawaii have been radically altered by human development, but right offshore in the briny blue Pacific, things seem much more natural. Snorkeling and tide pool gazing are popular activities for visitors here, and with good reason. The fish are interesting, readily observable, and sometimes spectacular. Not surprisingly, some shorebirds are associated with the saltwater habitats, and they're doing well today, even in the shadow of the tourism industry.
Well, there's that gray shorebird, sort of a plump gray shorebird with yellow legs. That's a wandering tattler. And a wandering tattler, oh, and there's another Pacific golden plover with it too, isn't there? A wandering tattler is another migratory bird, a naturally occurring bird. Those things breed way the heck up in northwestern Canada and Alaska, and they come all the way down here for the winter. So it's nice to know that here, right in front of the resort, in full view of all the tourists, we can at least find two species of birds that are naturally occurring and that don't mind being here. But we still haven't caught up with any of the native Hawaiian resident birds, the birds that never leave, that don't migrate, and that were here before the people. Especially the endemic birds, the unique birds that are found in Hawaii and nowhere else. So, on our next show, that's going to be my quest, our quest. Let's go looking for those birds. Let's see what we can see. It's an interesting story from a biological perspective and from a birding perspective. It's also a bit of a tragic story because there aren't too many of these native birds left compared to what there once was. And who knows, we may be successful, we may not, but that's half the fun of birding. Anyway, in the meantime, happy birding to you, and I'm going to get back to my tattler. Bye now.
And don't forget our title contest. Send in your suggestions, or if you like the title Twits and Pishers, do tell us why.